Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Development Control A committee meeting on Wednesday, the 28th of October, 2020, at 2 p.m. I just have a few things to say before we move to the formal agenda for today's meeting. The formal legal standing of the meeting. This meeting is being held under Government Statutory Instruments, Local Government England, the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meetings England Regulations 2020. To take account of these regulations, Bristol City Council has produced a set of virtual meetings procedure rules, and these are available on our website. This means that the decisions made by the committee will have the same standing and validity as if they had been made at a meeting in City Hall. Members of the public who have submitted written public forum statements, I can confirm that your statements have been circulated to all members of the committee prior to the meeting, and they will be taken into account when the decisions for each application are made. Some of you have requested to address the committee concerning your statement and have been provided with details on how to do so. You will be held in the waiting room for this meeting until it is time for you to address the committee, and you will then be invited in to do so. Please note that you only have 1 minute to speak. After you've finished speaking, you will be removed from the meeting, but will still be able to view it via the public broadcast on YouTube. Members of the public, although you will see a number of different people on your screen during the course of the meeting, only myself and the other councillors will make the decision on each application. Members of the committee would please ensure your sound is muted when you're not speaking. And when you have spoken, please remember to mute your sound again. When you wish to speak, would you please indicate by using the Zoom raised hand facility. I will invite each of you to speak by way of a queue system. Could you make sure that the councillor prefix is in front of your name if you are a councillor? If you're leaving the meeting or returning to the meeting, I need to be aware of that fact. Otherwise, I will assume that your disappearing from the screen is an indication of you having had to leave the meeting permanently. Moving a vote. When moving a vote, would you please indicate as above using the Zoom hand to speak and wait till I ask you to speak. Please then clearly state what you're moving, particularly for the benefit of the public. The first vote, in accordance with our process, would be in line with the opposite recommendation. If you're seconding a motion, please again indicate using the Zoom hand. Wait for me to call you. This again is particularly for the benefit of the public watching. Voting. I will call each councillor in turn by name, and I will work around the screen as I see you on my screen, which I appreciate is not the same as viewers or yourselves do, but it is the one way which actually works. Please state clearly if your vote is for, against, or abstain. This will ensure that the vote is accurately recorded and enable members of the public to properly observe the vote. Do I have any questions from councillors on the procedure? Thank you. We will now move to the formal agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence and substitutions?
Yes, apologies received from Councillor Steve Clark, Chair.
Thank you. Any further apologies, substitutions? Does any councillor have any interest to declare regarding the two items on our agenda today? Councillor Clive Stevens has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. One of them is my usual. So I've got two interests to declare. First one is I've written a book about local democracy, and I've been told I must declare this as a pecuniary interest. The second point is I'm ward councillor for the first item, Yard, Woodland, Terrace. I've kept out of this and left it to Councillor Carla Denyer, who's speaking later today. Therefore, neither interest predetermines my decisions today, and I can stay on committee.
Thank you. Any further declarations of interest? I take that as a no. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can I approve these as a correct record? And before I do that, does anybody have any amendments they'd like to make? Okay, proposer and a seconder for that, may I have? Councillor Windows, all right. Councillor Smith, Councillor Goggin, proposing and seconding. So those are now approved. So I'm now going to move to our Head of Development Management, Gary Collins, and ask, Gary, would you please take us through the appeals and anything you feel that needs to be highlighted to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Usual reports in front of you. Happy to take any questions. There's a couple of things I'd just like to highlight, though, and it's under the theme of Bedminster Green, an area of the city that the committee will be familiar with. And you will note on page 15 of the papers, so first of all, items 14 and 15, appeals have been received relating to the former Pring and St Hill site on Malago Road, known as Plot 1. And this was the site where you saw an application from A2 Dominion quite some time ago. I was looking this up earlier, and you actually determined that application, refused it on the 4th of September last year. So that appeal and the arrangements have taken some time to come around. Following that, the applicants made a further application making some changes, but then before we had an opportunity to report it to you, they appealed against non-determination. So we have 2 appeals, and they're listed there in the papers under hearings. And it's our understanding the hearing is likely to take place just before Christmas, so I think it'll be a virtual hearing. So that is the plan for those appeals. And then also on the same page, item 16, a site that you'll know very well, St Catherine's Place, known as Plot 2. There's an appeal there, which is going to be dealt with via a public inquiry. Now, this is the scheme that you refused at your meeting on the 22nd of January earlier this year. We have been having a productive dialogue with the developers there, actually, and in fact, in the last few days, a revised application has been submitted, which will be brought to you in due course. Until then, though, the appeal has to take priority. Whilst the inquiry date hasn't been absolutely fixed, we believe it's going to take place at the end of January. So in terms of, putting together evidence to support the council's case at that inquiry, that work starts now, really. So that will be our priority in terms of our work on that site, which is a shame, but that we have to deal with the appeal first. So 2 quite notable things to kind of pick out there, Chair, and happy to take any questions as ever.
Thank you. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if we could hear what, if any, effect the passing of the other plot just adjacent to the last meeting might have on the St Catherine's Place appeal, because one of the things I raised in that meeting was that it seemed to me that they were sort of quite close and fell slightly opposite sides of the margin in terms of the officer recommendation. So I wonder if there's any effect of that.
So, Chair, I think we had this potential appeal in mind when we brought the Dandara scheme, the Plot 4 scheme, to the committee. And I think we feel, whilst obviously there were objections to the Dandara scheme, we feel that it, from an officer point of view, it was on balance acceptable, whereas St Catherine's Place was, wasn't even on balance, really, was unacceptable. I think it was much taller, and certainly the impact of the main block on existing residential properties was really significant and affected a large number of properties. So I think the officer view is really that they were, whilst there are some similarities, obviously, in terms of being high density residential led developments, there were some clear differences between the two schemes. And I think, you know, the resolution to grant permission for the site next door doesn't prejudice our case for the St Catherine's Place site. Clearly, as appellants, they will try and draw comparisons, but we feel in a good place where we can say, no, they are different in some crucial areas.
Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. I'm interested, Gary, because all three of these have been, in theory, linked to the master plan for the area. How much weight would a planning inspector give to a master plan?
Well, hopefully the same weight that officers gave the framework and that yourselves as members gave the framework, really, which was that it should be given some weight because it went through, you know, a collaborative process in terms of preparation. There was public consultation, and then it went to cabinet before it was, you know, approved. But, you know, it doesn't carry the same weight as an SPD, such as the urban living SPD. So hopefully, you know, the inspectors in both those cases will take a similar view. And at the beginning of their decision letters, when we eventually get those into next year, they will set out the weight that they give various documents. So we'll know then, but I'm fairly confident they'll give it the same weight as us, and indeed that you did as a committee.
Okay. And enforcement, anything you'd like to highlight, Gary, and any questions from councillors?
Only, Chair, to note there's one new notice served since the last time the committee met.
Any questions? I see no hands. Great, thank you. Okay, then we move on to the two applications. And as a general point, just to say that I will take public forum statements before the application that they refer to. So they've been two tranches. So the first application then is the Yard Woodland Terrace. And we have obviously, again, as a general point, we have received all of the public forum applications that have been submitted to Democratic Services. We received them in time to read them, but we have 4 people who on this particular application have asked to come and speak to the committee. And the first person I have here is Rod McCulloch. Is Rod McCulloch present, Oliver?
Yeah, he should be coming in now, Chair.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm just looking for. You are WUK, WD.
Yeah, I'm calling from a works computer. So it's my name is Roderick McCulloch, and I'm the resident in Flat 8, Redland Court.
Great, thanks, Roderick. Okay, you have 1 minute. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, obviously, gentlemen, I've put in my written submission, which I assume you have read. I just wanted to emphasise the proximity and visual impact that the potential new build will have on Redland Court. And I think there's an assumption that the back of Redland Court is just a car park, which is not. It's actually, there's private terrace there for Flat 8 and Flat 7. It's actually the front of my property. It's at the back of the building, but it's the front of my property. There will be a loss of light, and we use it for parking, and we use it for an amenity because we congregate there to get to the last sun. And the shadow study did point out that there will be a loss of light. I think there'll be significantly more than the study. I appreciate a view is not covered under planning law, but we live in a conservation area, and I would have thought that the character and the look of the area was important. This will infill the visual space as you look from the front of my property to a large grey gable end. So as I say, I just feel it's inappropriate. It's too large for the site. It's too tall. I think it's 2-storey, not 1.5. But anyway, So it is just, I think there's been some assumptions made about the back of this property, which is to say the front of a property, and it is very close proximity, and it will adversely affect the residents of where I live. As I say, it's laid out in more detail in the written submission. And I thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you, Roderick.
Thank you.
Now, Simon Redpath. Do we have Simon?
No, Chair, I don't think we have Mr. Redpath.
Okay. Do let me know if he arrives, and then we'll include him in if he's in time. Jason Bailey.
Yeah, Mr. Bailey should be coming in now.
Hello, Mr. Bailey.
Hello.
You are sideways on, but carry on anyway. That's better. Thank you. Welcome. You have 1 minute to speak to us.
Is that okay?
That's excellent. Thank you very much. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. There are 26 properties plus 8 in development overlooking this site on 3 sides, which will be affected in this already overdeveloped and overpopulated area. I've submitted my statement, including technical anomalies, like the 21-metre planning rule, which has been ignored, and the drop in height of the windows to 0.9 metres. We're all very concerned, as these plans are purely to increase the value of the land, and in all likelihood, alterations will be made by the new owners, as is the case in many instances. Lastly, I want to draw your attention to a very similar case on Elliston Road. The case officer refused planning and recommended a single-storey dwelling or workspace. This may resolve many of the issues made by 33 objections to Woodland Terrace. It is our view a single-storey development be recommended. Thank you very much for letting me talk.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Thank you, Jason. Next, we have Councillor Carla Denyer.
Chair, I think we've got Mr. Redpath now, so if you want me to let him in.
Yes, please. Hello? Hello, you are muted, Mr. Redpath or Mrs. Redpath.
Apologies, it's actually Mrs. Redpath.
Oh, hello. Okay. Right. Do you have 1 minute, Mrs. Redpath?
Right. Thank you very much, committee, for taking time to listening to me. Our family home at 14 Auburn Road is the closest house to the proposed building. We strongly believe that the proposal has unacceptable levels of overbearing. The oversized windows will overlook all 4 levels of our home. This means that 2 of our teenagers' bedrooms will be overlooked. Habitable spaces facing one another need to be 21 meters apart. However, our first level bedroom window will only be 13.4 meters from our neighboring window. In addition, the kitchen wall will be 1.5 meters higher than our garden wall. How can this not be a loss of privacy? COVID-19 is ruling our daily lives, which is impacting our mental health and our well-being. Open spaces and natural views are one of the things left to hold on to and play a vital role in our lives. There is increasing evidence that nature in the urban environment is good for our mental health. I fear to think how this proposal will impact not only my direct family, but also all those other residents living in such close proximity of the proposed building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have Councillor Carla Denyer?
We do. She should be coming in now, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Denyer, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee.
Good afternoon.
I initially called this application in on 5 grounds. 2 of those, thankfully, have been addressed by the applicant altering the application in cooperation with the officer. Those were about the height of a wall that was going to be right up against the boundary and loss of sunlight to some of the neighbouring windows and gardens. However, it looks like there are still some issues with possible overlooking with the design, whether it's in-fitting or obtrusive in the area, and the impact on adjacent trees. A number of objectors have brought this up, and while the applicant says it'll be fine, it seems that there's some debate over that. So given the level of interest in this application, I wanted to call it into committee to make sure that you had the opportunity to scrutinise it in detail. And just to summarise, or just to make clear, I don't have an objection to the principle of development on this site. I just want to make sure that those issues are adequately resolved, whether that's by turning it down, referring it back, applying conditions. I'll leave that up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So we now move to the officer's presentation. Is that you, Natalie?
Yes, Chair.
Well, welcome. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'll just share my screen. I hope everyone can see the presentation.
Yes, that's clear. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Chair. So the application I'm bringing before the committee is the yard, Woodland Terrace. So in terms of the site location, the application site relates to a backland location at the end of Woodland Terrace in Clifton Down. The site is currently occupied by 7 single-storey garages, which are used by the applicant for the storage and repair of cars. The site isn't allocated within the local plan for any particular land use, but it is located in the White Ladies Road conservation area, and the houses along Woodland Terrace are Grade 2 listed. In terms of planning history, the site has no relevant recent planning history. However, it was granted historic planning and listed building consent in 1985 for the erection of a 2-storey dwelling and a garage. More recently, the site was subject to pre-application advice in 2019 for the demolition of the existing garages and the proposed erection of a 1.5-storey dwelling. In terms of the application seeks full planning permission for the demolition of the existing garages and the proposed development of a 1.5-storey dwelling with parking and a rear garden. The dwelling would comprise a 1.5-storey building. This would include rooms at first floor level within the eaves. The dwelling would be L-shaped, with the 1.5-storey element running parallel to the rear gardens or properties along Westfield Park, and a single-storey flat roof element running perpendicular to properties along Auburn Road. The property would be a 3-bed, 6-person dwelling with a rear garden and 1 off-street parking space within an undercroft. In terms of material finishes, the dwelling would comprise a mixture of natural slate and lightly coloured bricks with grey aluminium powder coated windows and doors. The single roof element would also include a green roof. During the determination of the application, a number of amendments have been sought by the council for the proposed dwelling to ensure its acceptability in this location. This has resulted in a number of amendments, including the dwelling's reduction in height to the ridge by 1.65 metres, and the roof pitch reducing by 2.5 degrees. The zinc standing seam roof has also been replaced with natural slate tiles, which are considered to be more in keeping in the conservation area. The windows at first floor level have also been located to the centre and northern element of the building to prevent direct overlooking of surrounding properties, and the dwelling has been set back from the boundary of 14 Auburn Road. Sorry, let me just move this. 14 Auburn Road to reduce impact. In terms of consultation, 2 rounds of public consultation have been held. During the first round of consultation, which expired in May 2020, 20 responses were received from local residents. All were an objection, and the reasons for objection are outlined on the slide. During the second round of public consultation, which expired in July, a further 13 responses were received. 12 were an objection and 1 was neutral. These comments raised the same concerns. And then there were no objections, however, from internal or external consultees. So turning to the key issues for the sites, the first consideration is the principle of development, which is considered to be acceptable. The site is located on previously developed land and is in a sustainable location. The proposed development would also positively contribute to the housing mix within the area, which has significantly less 3-bed dwellings in this ward than the Bristol average. A justification statement has also been submitted with the application, which confirms that the garages are currently used by the applicant's brother for the storage and repair of cars that are non-roadworthy. And this statement has been reviewed by both the Planning Department and Transport Development Management, and both are satisfied that the loss of the garages would not lead to the displacement of any vehicles on the street. Turning to the next issue, which relates to the design and the harm to the conservation area. During determination, a number of concerns were initially raised by the City Design Group and continually raised by local residents about the scale, appearance and siting of the proposed development given its location. However, following the receipt of formal comments from the City Design Group, the applicant sought to address the concerns by amending the plans. As outlined earlier in the presentation, the dwelling has been reduced in height and scale, set back from the nearest residential property, and the materials have been revised. The City Design Group have been reconsulted on the revised plans and have welcomed the reduction in height and scale, set back from the nearest residential property, and this is considered to be acceptable in this location. The revised materials have also been welcomed. However, given the site's location within the conservation area, pre-commencement conditions for further sample panels and larger scale details are requested. The proposals have also been discussed and reviewed by the Conservation Officer, and there's been no objection raised. Turning to harm to residential amenity, so there have been a number of concerns raised by members of the public related primarily to overlooking, overbearing and overshadowing. In terms of overlooking, a thorough review of the proposed development has been undertaken, and it is considered that the development would not result in any direct overlooking. 2 out of the 8 windows facing Auburn Road are for bathrooms and would include obscured glass. The location of the 2 remaining windows on this eastern elevation have been revised during determination, and both are now located parallel with the centre of Woodland Terrace, so would not result in any direct overlooking. The 2 windows on the western elevation, fronting onto Westbury Park, are roof lights located above the landing and stairwell, so would not enable direct overlooking. And the final 2 windows on the southern elevation, which would serve the master bedroom, would overlook the rear garden of 25 Westbury Park. However, there are existing outbuildings located in this part of the large garden, and therefore it is considered that the impact of overlooking is acceptable. In terms of overbearing, the reduced scale is now considered to be acceptable, particularly given the built form that surrounds the site, which comprises predominantly 3 to 4 storey dwellings. During determination, the dwelling has also been set back from the boundary of 14 Auburn Road, and along this boundary, the proposal would only be 1 storey in height. There have also been concerns raised by residents within the coach house along Westfield Park. However, the proposed dwelling is approximately 14 metres from the rear of this property, and the property would be partially screened by retained mature trees and an existing gazebo in the adjacent site. Finally, turning to overshadowing, A shadow study was requested during determination, and this was submitted at the same time as the revised plans. The shadow study shows that due to the height of the existing surrounding buildings and boundary walls, the proposed development would only marginally increase the level of overshadowing at all times of the year to the rear car park of Redland Court and not the dwellings within Redland Court. There has been anecdotal evidence provided by neighbours at Redland Court indicating that the car park is also used for amenity space. And whilst this is acknowledged, the increase in overshadowing is minimal, and it's therefore considered that the increase would not warrant the overall refusal of the application. The dwelling also meets the required national space standards, and future occupiers would have access to private amenity space. Finally, the key issues that were considered in the report relate to transport, trees and sustainability. In terms of transport and access, the application has been reviewed by Transport Development Management, and they have raised no objection. Turning to trees, concern has been raised by a number of residents about the proposed development's impact on adjacent trees within the rear gardens of the Coach House and 26 Westfield Park. As such, an arboricultural impact assessment and foundation report were requested in support of the application. The arboricultural impact assessment confirms that the proposed development would not result in the removal of any trees, but the overhanging branches would be cut back to the boundary line, but this is in line with the owner's common law right. The arboricultural team has reviewed both reports and raised no objections, although has requested conditions, and the details of 7 proposed trees at the site would be secured via a landscaping condition. Finally, the proposed development would achieve approximately a 26% reduction in residual carbon emissions, which is above the policy requirement. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined within the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Natalie. Excellent. Does anybody have any? Councillor Wright, is that your hand up for this time or for the last time?
It's for this time.
Okay. So, Councillor.
Yeah, the whole thing crashed, so I've lost about 5 minutes during the presentation. So, can I have a recap of what happened when I lost?
What?
You can ask questions, Fabian.
Okay.
With any things that you may feel you have missed. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, could we have, when the officer showed the shadow plots, we only saw the solstice, which is not a very helpful indication. Can we have a view of the plot on the equinox, please?
Sorry, Chair, I'll have to find that and come back to it because I haven't got.
Do you have another question, or shall I ask Steve Smith if he wants to put it? Well, Natalie Hunt.
That's all I've got.
Okay. Councillor Smith, do you want to ask your question while Natalie looks for that?
Yes, I will. This may also involve Natalie looking at documents, so we'll see how we go.
I haven't solved the problem. I was trying.
Good, nice try. In the public forum, in my package on page 15 to 17, we've got some artist impressions here of what the building would look like from various viewpoints. Are those, I appreciate it's very difficult to measure, but in your view, are those accurate? Is that a reasonable representation of what people would see?
It is difficult to measure. Obviously, with the application, there were some cross sections shared by the architect, which were undertaken to scale. They didn't provide any 3D visuals like the ones that have come in as part of the public forum statement. So I think it's quite difficult for me to be able to say whether that is accurate because they aren't to scale.
Fair enough. And just a couple of bits I'm hoping you can clarify for me. In the public forum, we heard a couple of people mention the 21-metre rule. I'm not familiar with that. Could you just explain what that is and how it applies? And similarly, there was mention of common law rights when it comes to trees. I'm guessing that means the applicant could cut those trees back to his boundary anyway if he wanted to, regardless of any planning consent. But if you could just clarify, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Correct. So yeah, there are two questions there. So in terms of the first one, the 21 meters, that is a sort of a rule of thumb that we have in planning for what is considered to be an acceptable distance between habitable rooms. In this case, the 21-metre rule was considered. However, there isn't any direct overlooking or, yeah, that's probably the right word, between habitable rooms because of the location of the windows. There aren't any that would directly face each other. So the 21-metre rule wasn't explored in further detail in the committee report. In terms of your second question, in relation to the pruning of trees and the common law rights, is exactly what you said. There is a common law right for someone, any member of the public, to prune a tree or a bush back to their boundary line, and the applicant could do that now if they wanted to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mark, are you happy with the? Do you want to see further drawings regarding the equinox shadow drawing?
It would be good to see the equinox one. I mean, if it's not going to be possible, then I guess we do without it. But I guess for future reference, the equinox is a better indicator than either of the solstices of a realistic shadow.
I can share the. There we go. So I'm sharing the shadow study now. So this is the spring equinox on the screen. So I'll try and get this. Can you see that, or is it not sharing? Yeah. So that's the spring. This is the summer solstice. I can zoom in a little bit so it's a bit clearer. That's the summer, and then the autumn equinox is here. So there is a slight increase at midday, but it is minimal in terms of an increase in overshadowing.
That helpful, Mark?
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. Councillor Stevens, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, I'd like to correct a misfact exists nowadays. If you have overhanging branches in a conservation area, you still have to file a section 211 notice before you are allowed to take your common law rights. And if it's got TP, which applies here, and if it's got a TPO on, you have to file a planning application before you can use your common law rights. So because planning statute, it trumps common law rights. But to my questions, the previous approval in 1985, a long time ago, should we give that any weight or some weight? I recall previous approvals from others have sometimes had to take great weight, but not so far back.
If I can, I may refer to Gary on the age of that.
That's fine, yes. 1985, I remember 1985. You should give it weight because it's a decision that the City Council made, well, it was the City Council back then, as local planning authority. You should give it weight. Since then, though, the area will have changed. The planning policies will have changed as well. So I noticed in the second item, there's talk of the change in policy background between 2006 and 2020. So, yeah, I think we'd be misleading you by saying give it significant weight, but you need to have regard to it anyway. It does exist. It's long expired though, and policies have changed since.
Okay, thank you. My second question, and I've got three in total. My second question relates to the conservation area as a heritage asset and views into the conservation area. I picked up from the public forum, Redland Court, which is 24 Redland Park, views from there, which of course are private views, into the conservation area would be dramatically changed. And therefore, I'm assuming when we talk about views as a heritage asset, we're talking about public views into that. That's where the NPPF and BCS 22 kick in. So are there any public views from that sort of area that would be of the conservation area heritage asset that would be affected? So firstly, can you confirm it is just public views that we're interested in? And secondly, whether any public views would be affected?
Correct, it is public views. And in relation to public views, there will obviously be views along Woodland Terrace. Those are really the only place that you would get public views of the development. But those views aren't considered to be affected enough that it would warrant the refusal of the application. And that has been both discussed with the City Design Group, Urban Design Officers and Conservation Officer.
Okay, we are told in the NPPF that reduction in heritage assets should be given significant weight. So I'll think on that one. And finally, the foundations to enable these trees to stay in place, because they take quite a lot of water, and if you've got clay soils, you get subsidence. Do we get any guarantee, well not us, but does the buyer of the house get any guarantees that it will be subsidence proof?
The thing that's controlled through the only thing that we can control through planning is we have a foundation condition, which is a compliance condition and requires the development to be constructed in accordance with the foundation report that has been submitted. In terms of providing ongoing reassurance to the buyers, that's not a planning matter. It can't be controlled via planning.
Okay, the reason I'm asking here is because at another site we had a requirement for insurance as a key planning matter. If you remember the one to be built under the cliff, should we condition an insurance if we can't condition a guarantee? Should we condition that insurance is taken out? Because otherwise, the moment you see subsidence, those trees will be felled, and it will be because of our decision today.
Can I come in there? I think on the cliff top type proposals that we've had, I think they're quite unusual circumstances, and that's under the planning grounds of unstable land, which is a planning issue. Here we're talking about, relationship between buildings and trees. I think we're seeking to cover that off as best we can under planning conditions. In terms of whether those foundations will do the job they're expected to in terms of keeping the property stable and upright, that's under the building regulations. So I think where there's an adequate control under other legislation as local planning authority, we should leave it to that really. And there are, warranties involved with that process as well. So, my advice is we wouldn't need to control that under planning.
Okay, thank you. Finished, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Smith.
Yeah, thank you again. I just wanted to pick up on the questions that Clive was asking actually about views, and particularly the private views from various houses and gardens and terraces and whatever. I appreciate there is no right to a view and that we can't consider a planning application on those grounds. But in terms of the amenity to existing residents around the site, if somebody built a 2-story high wall on my back fence, I'd be a little upset, and I can understand why people are. To what extent does that compromise the amenity of the people who live around this, and how much is that taken into consideration in your recommendation?
So it's a tricky one because there is no planning right to review. The way that it's considered is looking at those other impacts in terms of residential amenity, which were the three that I listed: overlooking, overshadowing, and overbearing. Obviously, the report outlines sort of the assessment that's been undertaken and the conclusions made, and on balance, it is considered that those three elements of sort of residential amenity are acceptable given the various amendments that have been made through the application.
Okay, thank you.
You're on mute, Councillor Alexander.
I'm on mute, sorry. I keep doing that because unfortunately there's PPE going up down on trolleys outside. We move now to discussion. So does anybody have a point they wish to raise, or it's up to you if you wish to have a discussion or not, in fact? Councillor Mark Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by saying that it was pleasing to see some genuine changes made to the plans as a result of consultation, and because we don't always see that. So I was most concerned with the loss of light affecting people to the north, but the fact that the building is oriented north-south and the land to the north is a car park does swing it for me. The shadowing patterns that we see on the equinoxes are really quite minor, and I don't feel that they affect people. It's the plans overall are relatively modest intrusion on the surrounding properties. It is quite tight in there, there's no doubt about that, but actually it's nowhere near as tight as it is, for example, in Victorian Terrace areas like Southfield. So I feel it's acceptable and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Breckles.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As actually someone who lives in a Victorian Terrace, I know exactly what Mark Wright was getting at. Like him, I'm very pleased with the reduction in height, which I think does make a difference. I think the original height would have been too much on this site. I don't particularly like the style of the building in that location, but that is all a matter of taste. I don't see any reason to reject it. That we do need housing in Bristol, and these sort of brownfield sites, these sort of semi-derelict brownfield sites are going to have to be brought into use. So I see no reason to not to support the application.
Thank you. Can I ask people to put their virtual hand down when they're finished, please? Councillor Steve Smith.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my big concern with this is overbearing, hence the questions that I was asking. And I just look back at the report, which says it's considered there'll be no detrimental impacts in terms of overbearing. I don't agree. I think there are detrimental impacts, and I'm really torn as to how to balance those detrimental impacts against the benefits of providing housing. Generally, I think it is a good place to put a house. I think for me, it just squeaks in on the side of acceptable, but I wouldn't say I love it. But there we are.
Thank you. I think I am now looking to someone to propose a motion in line with the officer recommendation, because that is our procedure. So would someone like to test that? Councillor Goggin has proposed that. Councillor Windows seconded it, from what I can see here. So we will test now a motion to approve in line with the officer's recommendation. And I will go round and I will name each councillor as I see you on my screen, and I will expect you to say for, against, or abstain. Okay, Councillor Windows.
For.
Okay, Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Hickman,
4.
Councillor Davis,
4.
Councillor Smith,
4.
Councillor Breckles,
4.
and myself 4. Oliver, where does that leave us, please?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. So the application is approved. Thank you. We move directly on now to our next item on the agenda, which is land and garages adjacent to 5 New King's Court. Just to repeat what I said earlier, all public forum statements have been circulated to all the members of the committee well before the meeting, so have been read. And I have 4 people who have asked to bring their statement to the committee. The first one, and I'm going to apologise in advance because I may well get your surname wrong. Michael Broggio. Oliver, do we have?
Mr. Brogo, can you hear us okay?
Broggio.
I see you've entered the meeting. He's on mute, so I'm just going to ask him to unmute and see if that makes a difference.
Okay.
Mr. Brogo, can you hear us all right?
Shall we move to Caroline Harrison while he...
Yes, let's do that.
If Caroline is there. Hello, Caroline. Can you see and hear us?
This is all to me now.
Yeah. Right. Caroline, can you hear us?
Hello.
Shall we move to Caroline Harrison while he... Caroline, you need to turn off the YouTube.
Hello. Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. And we can hear you loud and clear. You have 1 minute to speak to the committee, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, I'm Caroline. I'm the applicant. I'm also a local resident. I've lived at Bishop Road, which is just behind the plot, for nearly 15 years. The house that we would like to build is for our family and it's a self-build project. I'm a garden designer and I've worked closely with the architects to design the house with high eco credentials in terms of design, build materials, energy efficiency and biodiversity. And the house has been A-rated for energy efficiency and CO2 emissions in the sustainability report. And we've worked really hard throughout the long planning process to satisfy all the planning requirements and to minimise the impact our house may have on our neighbours. We now have the support of the planning department, the transport department, the church, the PCC, and the majority of our neighbours, and I hope we will have your support today. I know a small minority of our neighbours are concerned that the church lane, which we're using for access, may not be safe for pedestrians. However, the church lane has been used for a wide variety of activities from the church hall for 50 years without any incidents, and the majority of our neighbours and the various representatives from the church hall have all stated the church lane is safe and that one extra household would make very little difference. I'd just like to take this opportunity to reassure any concerned neighbours that we only have 2 car parking spaces, one for myself and one for my husband. We are both experienced and careful drivers and we pose absolutely no risk to pedestrians.
Thank you very much, Caroline. You've had your minute and it's very clear.
You. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have Michael yet? No? Seemingly not. Oliver, do we have Angelica and Claridge and Graham Thomas?
We do have Mr. Thomas, Chair.
Jalika and Claridge and Graham Thomas. We'd task Chair.
Mr. Thomas, can you turn off your YouTube feed, please? Because otherwise we'll get echo. It's like having the radio on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Thomas. Welcome to the meeting. You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak in support of this planning application on behalf of myself and my partner, Angelica Claridge. We live at 167 Bishop Road and feel that the proposed house and landscaping will introduce a marked improvement to the current condition of the site and improve the safety and security of the area at night for pedestrians, the church and the surrounding properties. We feel that many of the concerns raised over the road safety of the unadopted lane that in part have led to this committee taking place exist currently and are not directly pertinent, relevant or attributable to the proposed development. For over 10 years of occupancy and with regular pedestrian usage of the lane, we have never had any concerns for our safety, despite additional homes having been built in that time. Additional traffic caused by the development would be insignificant when compared to the, at times, high usage of the lane by users of the church, playgroup and other events in the church hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So Michael is still, I can still see Michael on the screen, but Oliver, do we have no sound?
It doesn't appear so. No, we do have Councillor Fodor if we want to.
Councillor Martin Fodor, then, please.
Hi, Councillor Fodor, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. I've got...
1 minute, Councillor Fodor.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm a local ward councillor. I've called in the application for this committee, and I do this very rarely. I've not done so lightly on this occasion, but I feel things haven't been clear enough. Our own roles as a Planning and Highways Authority has raised some questions. The clarity of our policy, the availability of information, the timing of information, the changing documentation right up to the last minute have made things difficult for a number of people on both sides, I think. So I wanted the committee to be seen and to be able to hear people, to settle the position and the policies of the council as clearly as possible. The reason is this isn't the last of the backland developments with private lanes that are likely to apply for development in the city, and we need to be clear, what is our policy? In the past, we've rejected applications due to highway safety and adoption possibilities, the implication that we would have to take on the cost. And this could happen again if we're not absolutely clear about our policies and make the information available in a timely fashion. Documents are gone on the website right up to the last minute, as far as I can see, and that hasn't made it easy for anyone. So please listen to the submissions, including those that haven't been present, and I hope you can make a very clear position clear on this and a learning experience for the authority for future applications. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Oliver, I think we'll assume that Mr. Brogier is not here. And
yes, Chair. I mean, I'll just assure him that obviously we have his written statement and that's been given to the committee, and they will obviously take that into account as part of the decision making, but I think we have to move on.
Thank you. Yes, we do. Okay, then we hand over to Matthew, and we'll also have the support of an officer from Transport Development Management if necessary. Thanks, Matthew.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and we can see your screen as well, which is excellent.
Brilliant. Okay, so the application before you today relates to land and garages adjacent to 5 New Kings Court in Bishopston. Planning permission is sought to demolish existing garages on the site and erect a single dwelling with 3 bedrooms. It will be a self-build project, and officers are recommending approval subject to conditions. So the application is before committee due to Councillor Fodor's referral request, which is included on the slide, so I won't repeat that. In terms of comments from members of the public, there's been a fairly balanced response. In common with Councillor Fodor's concerns, the majority of comments in objection have been with regard to perceived safety of the private access lane serving the development. Concerns have also been raised in terms of the quality of the design and the impact on neighbours. Contrary to these comments, there have been support comments which have suggested the access is safe and complemented the design and consider the impact on neighbours to be acceptable. As members have been issued with a detailed report, this presentation will generally focus on the key issues raised by Councillor Fodor and neighbours. So this is the location of the site marked by the red star in Bishopston. It's a backland site accessed from King's Drive via a private accessway. Also accessed by this private lane is the Church of the Good Shepherd. It's Church Hall, which also houses the Magic Dragon Play School, and 5 houses in New King's Court. The location is considered to be sustainable and a principal development sound. Here's some photos of the existing site. As you can see, there are 2 garages on the site in varying states of disrepair and a garden area which is understood to be used by the applicant. The character is generally varied. There's no distinct or important character, I'd advise. This is fairly common with backland sites like this. So here's the proposed block plan. As you can see, the development has a staggered layout, which pushes the majority of the built form away from the neighbours, which are number 4 and 5 New King's Court. And this minimises the impact in terms of privacy, outlook in daylight and sunlight. Any overshadowing will largely occur to the north, which is the car park of the church. There will be some minor shadowing to number 4 New King's Court, but that's considered to be acceptable. You can also see quite a detailed landscaping scheme, which includes wildflower planting, a green and brown roof, a wildlife pond, 3 new trees, and integrated sustainable urban drainage. So this is the proposed ground and first floor plans. It's a 3-bedroom house and it's larger than the space standards require, so we're confident it will provide a good living environment which is flexible and adaptable moving forward. The garage will provide cycle storage for 3 bicycles as well as 1 car parking space. And we're confident that the cycle parking can be used when a car is parked in the garage. Sorry, refuse storage is to the front of the garage here. So the proposal is 2 stories in height, and the ridge height is towards the centre of the site. It has a similar height to numbers 4 and 5 New King's Court. The roof form is broken up, which helps minimise the overall bulk and impact on neighbours. A fairly simple material palette of render cladding, grey roof tiles, as well as the green and the brown roof. The brown roof is the flat roof. The proposal will have a fairly distinct appearance, but this is generally in keeping with the varied backland character. As you can see on the west elevation, there's quite a large photovoltaic panel array, which will provide a 66% saving on residual carbon dioxide emissions. As well as that, the proposal includes a number of energy efficiency measures, which will result in a 15% saving on residual CO2 emissions, which means the proposal exceeds policy in this area. Moving on to the meat of the issue, the private access road. So it's a tarmac lane of approximately 50 metres long, which Transport and Management considered to be approximately on average 3 metres wide. You've got 2 views here, one from King's Drive and one from within the site. As you can see, the line is the lane is well managed, has appropriate signage and good visibility from either end. As I've said, it also serves number 1 to 5 New King's Court, the Church of the Good Shepherd, and the Church Hall and Preschool. The lane is not adopted by the council, and Transport Development Management advise it will not be in future. If approved, an advice note would be added to the decision notice for this application to state this. So initially, Transport Development Management did object to this application for a number of reasons, including the red line for the application, the quality of the cycle parking, turning, refuse and recycling collection, and the limit of properties allowed to be served from an unadopted accessway. In response to these comments, Transport Development Management in response to Transport Development Management's comments, the applicant instructed a transport consultant to provide a written response to these comments. Revised plans were also submitted to overcome the issues surrounding the red line, cycle parking, turning, and refuse and recycling collection. Transport Development Management then reviewed this information and withdrew their objection. Principally, as the red line was amended to include the access lane, turning was demonstrated by swept path analysis. Bristol Waste acknowledged that they would service the property as they already do for numbers 1 to 5 New King's Court. Further to this, Transport Development Management advised that the existing use of the lane is relatively irregular to the other properties and that a car could pass a pedestrian. Further, Transport Development Management advised that the lane's width is sufficient to serve the proposed house, advising that the lane can accommodate a larger vehicle such as an emergency or a delivery vehicle. More generally, Transport Development Management advised that the increase in traffic associated with a new house would be approximately 5 new trips a day, which Transport Development Management advised would not make a significant or a severe impact over and above the current use of a lane. Further to this, Transport Development Management report that there is an absence of any recorded issues or collisions on the lane, which suggests it's capable of withstanding the slight increase in movements associated with this development. Turning to the issue of adoption, there are no planning policies that require private lanes to be adopted. As such, the matter of adoption isn't for consideration today, rather it's a consideration under the Highways Act rather than planning legislation. The key policy considerations for the access is whether it provides safe access for all users, and Transport Development have advised that it would. As such, officers recommend that the development should not be resisted on highway grounds. Now, I can understand why there's been some confusion about this, because previously decisions in the area have gone the other way. Essentially, if I just go through the planning history, number 1, 2 and 3 New King's Court got planning permission in 2001. Number 4 and 5 New King's Court got planning permission in 2007. However, prior to this, on the same plot as number 4 and 5 New King's Court, in 2006, there was an application refused for 3 houses. And this was due to a number of reasons, 2 of which related to transport policy. One considered that the private access lane was not adequate or safe to provide access for 6 dwellings, and the other concerned refuse collection. So the reason officers have reached a different recommendation today concerns the guidance and the policy which the 2006 application considered. Specifically, the refusal reason concerning access in 2006 relied upon Design Bulletin 32, which has strict rules concerning providing access by a private lane to over 5 dwellings. However, this guidance was superseded by the Manuals for Street, which has no such rules concerning private lanes serving houses. Rather, Transport Development Management advised that the proposal meets the expectations of the Manual for Streets. Further to this, there is a new planning policy context when compared to 2006. We have a new development plan, and we also have the MPPF introduced. And that's important because the MPPF has a higher threshold for resisting developments on highway grounds. So that's why we've made a different decision as to or recommendation rather, as to the private access. The other refusal reason related to refuse collection. However, Bristol Waste has confirmed that they would collect the refuse for the property as they do for the neighbours. So this refusal reason is no longer viable. So overall, there's significant positive weight associated with approving this development, against which minimal negative weight has been identified. The proposal would result in additional dwelling to the council's 5-year housing land supply, and is a more efficient use of land in a sustainable location. The proposal has bettered policy concerning CO2 emissions through the use of photovoltaic panels and energy efficiency design measures. And overall, I think the proposal would provide an improvement to the character of the area due to its design and comprehensive landscaping. As such, officers are recommending approval subject to conditions. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Could you clear the screen so I could see the councillors, please? Okay, Councillor Stevens, followed by Councillor Breckles for questions. Now question time.
Thank you, Chair. So my questions are about the private access lane. If this goes ahead, it will be used by the occupants of 6 houses. It'll also be used by the users of the church, the preschool, Magic Dragon, and the people visiting the sheltered housing. So you said this particular development would add 5 movements per day. How many movements per day are there on average at the moment? And are there sort of any peak times, rush hours along this lane, so to speak?
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I think I'm going to have to pass that over to my colleague Jane in Transport Development Management.
Yeah, hello. We don't have that information. The 5 movements a day has been taken from Trix analysis, which is based on general housing numbers. So you would say for a single dwelling house on average you'd get about 5 movements. So if you take into consideration the additional 5 houses up there, that'd be another 25 without the numbers of the people who attend the church and all the other facilities up there. I don't know, but this would be quite a minor increase in movements up and down that access lane in comparison.
But you don't know because you don't have the measurements.
No.
So, okay, I reckon at 5 miles an hour, it takes about 30 seconds to get down that lane if you've not got to stop because someone walking along there. Okay, I'm quite concerned that we haven't got that data, even a rough estimate. So I've no point in me asking more questions because you don't have the data. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Breckles?
I hope it's a simple one. On page 72 of the report, I can see where the entrance hall is. I'm just trying to work out which is the path to it. So how does someone get from the private lane to the entrance? I'm just trying to find, is this, it's just the map's a little bit unclear. Is this sort of a passageway coming past the music study room? Because there's a line in the middle, there's used to be 3 lines. There's what looks like a curb, and then 2 lines to the left of that curb. So I'm just wondering if that's the sort of access way for the car and the pedestrians. Residents to the house.
So, Matthew, can you see that?
Yeah, sure. Councillor Breckles, are you referring to the ground floor plan?
Yes, I am. Page 72 of the report.
Sure. I haven't got page numbers on my report, unfortunately, but on the ground floor plan, the garage is where the car would park using the site. So they would drive down the private lane and then most likely reverse into the garage.
So where is the private lane on the? Can you pull up a map and show me where the private lane is in relation to the building?
Yeah, sure. So the private, can you see that okay?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, the private lane, if you can see my cursor, comes down here.
Yep.
And then the garage is here under the brown roof.
Right.
So the car would make a manoeuvre and reverse in there.
And the entrance is
The entrance is here, yeah.
And the entrance of the house itself is 90 degrees back.
Yeah, the principal entrance is here.
Okay. Brown roof is what? Obviously a green roof has foliage on it. What does a brown roof do?
A brown roof also has foliage. They're generally considered to be better for biodiversity than a green roof.
Okay. So 2 types of biodiverse friendly roofs.
Yeah, that's correct, which, you know, is a benefit of the proposal.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, I have no more questions as far as I can see. Shall we move then to discussion? Councillor Steve Smith, do you wish to discuss, or is your hand accidentally up?
Yes, I do, thank you. I just wanted to perhaps offer some reassurance to Clive's question, as I can only offer anecdote, not data, but as it happens, I've been to events in this church hall in the evening, and what happens at the start of the event, and like most church halls, there's meetings most evenings at different clubs and things. A load of people drive in at the start of the event, park in the car park, and then at the end they all drive away again, and you get, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 cars turning up. So when you add that to daily nursery pickups and drop-offs, my feeling is that the difference between 5 houses and 6 houses also sharing that lane is, to be honest, insignificant. So just based on my anecdotal experience, I don't have any concerns about it.
I think that's the point, isn't it? What would be the change? And it would be insignificant. To actually, the analysis would need to include pedestrians as well, and end up being very, very sophisticated and probably disproportionate to the size of the development. Councillor Breckles, do I see your hand up?
Yes, you do, Chair. I must admit, I think, you know, I'm at a loss to know why this came to committee. It's, you know, it seems, you know, it's one extra dwelling on off a lane that already has several dwellings, and you know the impact will be insignificant. It's a nicely designed home. I'd quite happily live in something like that. It's, you know, it's a good use of a brownfield site, and you know, if the church is happy with it and they're going to have, you know, they're going to be closest to it, I really don't see what the issue is. So I'm going to be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens, your hand is up.
Thank you. I'm persuaded by Councillor Smith's level of evidence. I didn't need much more than that. The fact I got nothing was a bit concerning, and that perhaps might not happen again. But Councillor Smith, that's fine. Thank you very much for describing that. Therefore, I will support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Goggin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say that normally objections raise more action than acquiescence, and it's nice to see that there are more in support, local residents in support of this application than there are against, and on balance, I'm going to support it.
Thank you. I see no other people wanted to make discussion points, so therefore I will invite a motion in line with the officer recommendation to approve. Councillor Breckles, is that you proposing, and Councillor Smith seconding?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we approve in line with the officer recommendation.
Councillor Smith, you happy to second?
Yeah, happy to second that, Chair.
In that case, I will, as before, move around the screen as I see it and ask you to say for, against, or abstain. And the motion is to approve in line with the officer recommendation. Beginning with then Councillor Windows.
For.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Hickman.
For.
And myself for. Is that unanimous, Oliver?
Yes, that's unanimous, Chair.
So the application is approved. So to conclude, just say thank you to everybody who has attended, whether viewing or viewing, really. And thank you especially to officers who have put in so much work, not just planning officers, but also Democratic Services and IT officers have made this meeting possible for us all.